There are tons of mechanics in Gods Unchained, which causes it to be one of the most competitive ranked games I've ever played. That's why today, I'm bringing you 7 mechanics you probably don't know about it on your route to Mythic. In Gods Unchained, just like any other game that's competitive, every little misplay that you make pushes you closer to defeat, while every outplay you make is going to push you closer to victory. That's why it's important that you understand every mechanic that's featured in this video. The first tip I'm going to bring you is about the Mulligan phase. In Gods Unchained, when you ship one card during the Mulligan phase, you're essentially shipping every copy of that card. You won't be able to see it again for the rest of the Mulligan phase. This means technically, you're shipping up to 8 copies out of your deck, so that 4th card that you show up with is going to be a completely different card. You can almost guarantee that you're going to draw a card, leaving some probabilities really low. If you play a deck that's got 15 duplicates, you've already shipped 8 cards out of that 15. That allows you to make some very powerful choices during the Mulligan phase. If you need specific portions of your deck, and you're scared you're not going to get them, and you think it might be best to stay with certain cards that are suboptimal for you in that hand, you can ship them. This gives you one of the most powerful ways to sculpt your hand for the beginning of the game. It means you won't necessarily have to play off curve for the entire game. As long as your deck is built correctly and has a decent curve, or has some way to account for a lopsided curve, you'll be able to guarantee you don't ever get stuck with a hand that has all 5 and 6 drops that you can't play. I remember in Magic, it always felt terrible when I had hands that were just all lands or all spells, no lands, and I mulliganed to Oblivion, only to kind of feel defeated before the game even began. Gods Unchained does a really good job of making sure you as a player never feel that. The second mechanic I want to tell you about. You've probably already noticed what happens when you run out of cards in your deck and you have to draw. You start to take damage in incremental amounts. Every turn you pass that you don't have cards in your deck and you have to draw, you take more damage. Well, if you have spent all your mana for the turn, you don't take that damage. Not only that, but if you're playing Deception and you have the flip power, or you have some way to put cards back into your deck, you can stem that bleed and cut the damage off. That way, you don't die at the end of the game when you need that extra turn or two to close the game out. The third mechanic I want to talk to you about contains the mechanic Deadly. Did you know if you gave a creature that pings other creatures Deadly, that damage is also translated to Deadly? The way Deadly reads is that the damage a creature does causes lethal damage. That means your Flamecallers literally can clear the entire enemy board off, unless they have some of this next mechanic I'm going to talk about, which can be a little bit unfun to be on the receiving end of. The fourth mechanic I'm going to talk about is how Protection and Deadly interact with armor. In order to breach Protection through armor, or to use Deadly through armor, your damage would have to surpass the armor. This means creatures that are deadly with 1 attack point probably will never get through something that's armored. It's even worse in the case of Polyhymnia, where the creature has 4 armor. There's very few things that get through that. You can't even Canopy Barrage to break it, if you could even get through the ward. The fifth mechanic that's going to help you a lot against this Polyhymnia is the Ransom mechanic. Anything that changes the cost of an opponent's card in their hand definitely can help you out against cards like Polyhymnia, who are already a 9-drop. It's impossible to go above 9 mana in the game, even if you crystal. Therefore, if you can make the enemy's Polyhymnia or other 9-drops a 10-drop or 11-drop, they're never casting that for the rest of the game, and it's going to be dead weight in their hand for the remainder of the game. Control decks like to run 1 threat to finish the game out. A lot of them choose Polyhymnia. Being able to curb your opponent's deck by taking their win condition out is one of the most satisfying ways to close out a game. The sixth mechanic I'm going to tell you about. When a creature with a When a Creature Dies ability dies, if he died alongside all the creatures that would trigger, this means when you board wipe with your Famished Ghouls and creatures in play, you're not going to draw any cards from your creatures dying, nor will your opponents draw cards for their creatures dying. A little bit of poetic justice for doing something as savage as wiping out the board. My 7th tip is going to be extremely important for you mage players. I bet you thought your spell damage only applied to your stuff. Well, if you're playing against a Deception player who puts bombs on your side of the field or into your deck, your spell damage applies to those bombs when you draw them, or when they detonate on your battlefield. This means if you're ramping up with Scepter of Artistry, or just a bunch of spell damage creatures in general, you have to watch out about cards like that, so that you don't put those back into your deck. Inconspicuous Carriage can be a nightmare if you kill it with too much mana up, especially if you're playing a deck that runs a lot of spell damage. I can't tell you how many times I've played Deception Control, and I've seen my mage opponent leave 4 mana up when they kill my Carriage, only to draw bombs that are dealing 10 damage to them later in the game. I hope the information I've given you here today helps keep you from getting caught off guard in weekend rank. And armed with this information, I look forward to seeing you in the Mythic ranking. I want to thank you for watching today. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Gods Unchained content. And most importantly, have a Happy New Year!